All right, so welcome. This is the second session of the application series. The first was the post match panel. So if you missed that, you could also see the recording for that. But we'll start talking about ERAS. So it opened almost a month ago. So we'll see how people are feeling about it. We talked a little bit about it before we started, so we'll just skip this part. But as some of you all may have already opened and look at it, it looks somewhat like this. I know it's changed a little bit because it's an old picture. Um, but and you can feel free to put any questions in the chat or ask them out loud. It's fine. But basically, if you've already opened, created your login, you've gotten your tokens from your school to start, the personal information, biographic information, education are probably the easiest things, just kind of get out the way. Because you know that that's not hard information. The next thing will probably be to make sure that you have requested your letter of recommendations already. And so you can print that and make sure that you give it to the letter recommendation recommenders so that they have it, because it goes directly to ERAS and gets uploaded. And you often have to say that you will relinquish your rights to see the letter. And so those are some easy get it out the way things. After that, I would say the next step, obviously, one of the biggest ones is going to be the experiences and your personal statement. And I forgot the headshot, so that's something easy to do. Some people they get a professional one. Some people they just make up their own their own background, using blankets and things. We've got really creative during COVID, and just took a picture on their phone, and did it that way. So that's another thing that's really easy to upload as your photo. Do you have any questions about that?
Yeah, you said for letters of rec, there's something we need to print.
Yeah, so when you click on like letter of recommenders, you can put in the information for the well, you don't necessarily need to print it. ERAS will send it to them via email. So I guess I should clarify is you put in their information, ERAS will send them like a little PDF where it has your like ERAS number on there, your AMC number and everything. You just want to make sure that they send that with the letter because it has to be connected to your application. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you've already asked people for your letter recommendation and then you put their information in, like I would do like a follow-up and say, hey, like did you get an email from ERAS or AMC regarding the information that should accompany the letter for the recommendation?
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Um, so after you kind of gotten those things out of the way, the next good place to start, I will say, is with your CV. And so what the CV really helps you do is one, some programs might ask you for a CV, but two, it just allows you to put kind of all of your experiences in one place. It'll have your certifications there that should be listed on there because licensure is another place like your BLS or ACLS training and things like that should be on there. But you really want to be able to have all of your experiences there on your CV so that you can then kind of basically do a check mark of like which ones you want to prioritize. So something that is new this year is they're actually limiting the number of experiences you can put on the application. So that was not the case before. It is now limited to about 10 experiences, and you have about 1,000, it's like 1,020 characters to put your experiences. Now, the recommendations for your experience section, you have to put some information like what is the title of the organization, who's your supervisor, the dates, how often you participated in this experience. These should really be meaningful experiences that you grew from, that you gained a skill from, that wasn't just like health fairs like once every 2 months, something like that. That's not consistent. So things that were consistent, but also kind of speak to your skills and experiences that you bring to being a doctor, but also could bring to the residency. A lot of people have questions about whether you should do like paragraph form or you should do bullet form. I honestly would recommend doing bullets because you have to remember these people are looking at multiple applications. You want to be very concise and to the point, and you want to get your message across and not kind of get lost in the weeds, so to speak, if you write too much and you get lost in your writing. The other thing that is also new this year is that you can choose 3 most meaningful experiences. And that gives you more space to elaborate. Your focus with that really should be, why was this a meaningful experience and how did it impact you? How did you grow from that experience? And that varies a little bit from, in the usual space, you're kind of more so like just describing like, I researched this, I oversaw these many people, or, if you did, event planning, I planned so many, you don't say you just use action words, just planned 5 events related to this, engaging X number of volunteers. If you were doing some fundraising type things, you would say specifically fundraise X number of dollars to benefit whoever. So it's very kind of focused on the action and skill that you use. You don't need to refer to yourself like I or we, just the action that you did and focus on that impact that you had during those experiences. For the like 3 most meaningful experiences that you choose, you have like another 300 characters to be able to talk about why it was meaningful and what you learned from that. Any questions about that?
So when we write about 3 most meaningful, for each of those, we should write in paragraph form?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, so when you do most meaningful, I would definitely do paragraph form compared to when it's just experiences during bullet points.
Okay.
All right. And then there's another section I don't think I wrote on here, but it's called impactful experiences. And this is separate from most meaningful. So impactful experiences, this should also be more paragraph formatted. And it's basically a space in which you can talk about adversity that you experience. So if you're first generation or you grew up in a low social economic situation, or you like had to work to support family, or if you're parenting and had to go to med school, anything that you find as a experience of adversity, caregiving, any of those things that can highlight your resilience, honestly, because some people don't have to deal with those things while going to school. And that could be, during undergrad, med school, grad school, it doesn't matter the time frame in that. And that's the same for your experiences. All of your experiences don't have to be just during med school or grad school. It could be also during undergrad, or if you took any time off in between school.
Okay.
Right. Some other things that are new, and I definitely recommend looking at this QR code. It leads to a PDF from ERAS that kind of explain all these differences with a little bit more detail. Something that's also new this year is called signaling. So they're trying to, I don't think all residencies are particularly clear on how they're going to be using this. There has been some recommendations that have come out that this should not be utilized to dictate who you interview, but maybe perhaps who you provide a spot to, like how you rank somebody, perhaps. But it should not be impacting who you offer an interview to. However, in family medicine, different specialties have different number of residency programs that you can signal. For family medicine specifically, you can signal 5 residency programs, and this is indicating the residency programs that you are most interested in. So this also means that you need to do your research. So, that is, if you're not already, you definitely need to register for a national conference so that you can meet the programs. If programs are doing virtual meetups, social type things, go to those so you can ask the questions. Making sure that you visit their website so that you can get the questions that some questions you will get answered just from the website, and then you can, go past those kind of more superficial questions that you might have. Because basically when you submit in September, you need to be able to signal 5 programs that you're most interested in. And only the programs that know that you signal will know that you signaled them. Questions about the signaling? That's new this year.
Mm-mm.
The other thing that's also new is geographic preference. So you can choose 3. So this is like saying, oh, I prefer to be in the Southeast or the Northeast or the Midwest or the South or the West Coast, whatever. You get to choose 3 different geographic areas in the US. And only the programs within that geographic area will see that you chose that preference. There is an option to skip it, not answer it. Nobody will know that you didn't answer it. But if you select no preference, which is another option, this is shared with all of the programs that you do apply to that you don't have a preference. And then aside from that, you can also say setting preference, which is like, do you prefer to be in an urban location, suburban location, or rural location? And this is shared with all of the programs. This is also new this year.
Okay, I have a question about this.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard some pretty confusing ideas. It sounded like if you say no preference, everyone sees that you have no preference. But if you do have a preference, let's say your preference was the Northeast and you applied to a California school, the California school can see that you did not check no preference. So they can't, I heard it's like a blank. It's like a blank that they see.
Correct. It's like they don't get anything. So
Right.
if you choose the Northeast, the West Coast doesn't get anything. But they can't necessarily assume. They know that you did not choose the West Coast.
Yeah.
They also know that you did not choose no preference. So what that
Yeah.
means is the 2 options is, one, you either skip the question as in you did not answer it at all,
Mhm.
or you didn't answer West Coast and you answered something else. So there's 2 options. And in all honesty, they're utilizing these as ways of weeding out. And so part of that is because since COVID happened, people have been able to apply to more programs, right? Because they don't have to pay to travel there, they don't have to pay to do interviews and all of this stuff. And people have been over applying but not actually serious about certain programs. So this is a form of them being able to weed out. And so if you truly have no preference, I would just say no preference. And I can say, like, for me, when I was applying, I was like, I like to travel and explore. So I was like, I'll go anywhere. And I literally applied everywhere. I went to Washington. I had interviews in California, but I didn't go because I was just tired of interviewing at that point in time. But I went to Chicago. I was in the Northeast, the South. Like, I literally was, for the most of stuff, with like, the true Midwest, like, I don't know, down below Chicago. I applied to everywhere, so I really didn't care. I was like, oh, I'm okay with going to somewhere for like 3 or 4 years because at least I get to explore a new city. And so if that truly is what you have a preference for, I would just put that. Otherwise, it does kind of leave them guessing about, like, well, did they just not choose us, or did they not answer this question?
Right. Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's more of the, nuances of ERAS. A lot of things are new this year. Again, it's because, as I mentioned, they're trying to, you know, triage. But the experiences, you already have them. It's more of so just kind of editing the language, making sure they're concise, using action words. I definitely recommend like just Googling action words for CVs, if you need to. And doing that part and deciding what 10 is more important if you have more than 10. And then there's those 2 extra steps this year of, deciding if there's 3 meaningful ones, and then the impactful experience where you can talk a little bit more about your adversities. All right.
All right.
You had another question?
No.
Oh, so the next part of ERAS is the personal statement. And so I think this is probably the most time consuming one. And I would say, like, after most people don't start really working on this until maybe after national conference anyway. So it's okay, but I did want to put this in here because it is part of ERAS, obviously. And so my first recommendation is identify a theme. I think this is just important overall because if you can identify a theme of the message that you want to get across to the application reviewers, this can also help you decide what experiences that you want to prioritize on the experience part. Because if you can kind of put together a package that's consistent, they just kind of like, oh, okay, I get who this applicant is, and it's very consistent that this is what they're interested in, or these are the goals that they have for their career. That's helpful rather than have somebody just kind of like all over the place. To be able to be more memorable, but also for them to really get an understanding if this person's a good fit for their program. The other thing that's a little bit different, I think, than some other, like maybe your medical school personal statement, is that particularly for family medicine, they really want to know who you are. They want to know your personal story, and they want you to tell a story, and not just any story, but your story. So I think sometimes, people will talk about a lot about, like, why did I want to go to medicine? But it's like, okay, we already know that because you already got there. But also sometimes there's focus on other people, and their focus really should be on you. But while you're telling this story, and while you're telling your story specifically, you really want to also be answering the question of why family medicine. It should be clear at the end, like, oh yes, this person is definitely a fit for family medicine. You don't necessarily need to say, like, I want to go to family medicine because this, right? You really want to be you want to be evident by the story that you're telling, that is really highlighting your skills, your passions, what you have to offer, what makes you unique, what your career goals are, but also making it clear about what you're looking for in a residency as well. So the first thing I will say is, like, this is going to be a process. You're not, sorry, my dog. This is not something you're going to just like sit down and be able to write in one go. It really may be ideas come to you. One moment. Ideas come to you in the middle of the night, and you need to just like write them down, have things available, have your phone available. You can just write ideas as they come to you, making sure that you're also setting aside planning time and even writing time. So you can just say, okay, I'm going to write something for 15 minutes, or whatever comes, just write it so you can get your ideas down, and then you can obviously move things around. You're going to have multiple drafts of this, but you just want to have that time to have ideas come to you and be able to kind of brainstorm about what you want out of your personal statement. The other thing that people often will address in their personal statement, although now that there's the impactful experiences, this might be a better place to acknowledge it, is like any, time that was taken off, red flags. You want to describe what the challenge was, how you overcame it, what you did, and all of those things. But you want to always kind of spin it on what you gained from it. So, any questions about that? And we'll talk about example.
So what are the red flags? Because I know it's different for different specialties.
I
Um,
mean, a lot of people talk about red flags, but that depends. So that might be like failing a rotation, failing a course, like having to repeat or remediate, having to retake step or something like that, would be kind of considered like red flags because you have to also remember that the interest of the residency is to graduate someone, and not all residency programs can support people that may have some gaps in their education. So some programs they might not take anybody that has not passed a step test. That's not all programs, but I'm just saying some might that might be one of their criteria. So but being able to explain what was going on during that time, because some people were they were really going through a lot of things, like they may have lost a parent, or maybe they were just struggling with school and was depressed and didn't know how to study, or whatever the case may be. You really just want to describe those things that are like more so educational hiccups, I would say, because I think everyone learns from them and you gain something from it. I will say like family medicine as a specialty is like very forgiving, but it needs to be really evident that you've learned from it so that it's going to be less of an issue in the future as you're trying to pass up or trying to pass family medicine boards.
okay, all right.
Yeah. The other thing is, I know that some programs they may allow you to see your dean letter. So if there's anything that comes up around professionalism or something like that, that needs to be addressed. If somebody's put, on professional probation or something like that, that needs to be addressed. Things like that.
Okay, but something like a low ranking or like a low passing step score, like, do you need to explain that? Oh,
Mm-mm. No, mostly like failures,
okay,
like not passing.
all right, thank you.
Hmm. The other thing about your personal statement, it should be about 1 page. I would use WordPad. The font should be appropriate. I would say no less than 10, 11. 10 is even kind of small. So I would say 11 is more safe, but I'm sure some people have gotten away with 10. Have multiple editors look at it. The first is someone that's personal, that really knows you and your personal life, because they'll be able to really tell you, oh yeah, this essay sounds like you, or like, nah, you like putting up front. You need to go back. The other is like a family med doc, and then more so for grammatical type things, you can do like an English or career department at your university. Even if you don't have one in the med school, you should still have those resources available to you at the undergrad level. So definitely check those out. And then the other thing that's really important is that you visit each residency website, because some of them will have additional questions, and they may specify that they want you to answer in your essay. So you might have to have a different draft of your essay um, for that reason. Or you just have a different draft of your essay because you put the answers to the questions at the bottom of your essay. So that depends on what type of questions they're asking you. And usually if you're just gonna tack it on like at the end, like you use the same personal statement that you use for all the other programs. At the end, you just say like question one, copy what the question is, and then just answer it. And usually these are they'll tell you if they're word limited, but usually they're very like concise questions. They don't want like another essay. So no more than a paragraph, I would say, for those additional questions. Questions about that? So I'm gonna give you time to read this one. This is an example one, and then we kind of talk about what you may have taken away from this.
This is the intro.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts?
I think it's good. I find it it's something that I relate to pretty strongly, like coming from a tradition of strong women. Um, I think it helps give a picture of like what the person values.
Is this what you would typically think of for like an intro of a personal statement?
Maybe not. Like maybe not the. Hmm.
Sounds like you're
Uh,
in a dilemma. What's the dilemma?
Merlene thing.
Verlene says it introduces the reader to what the person values and who they are.
Just I feel like the end of the paragraph kind of ties it up with a bow, while I would probably leave it open ended if I still had more to add, like in the rest of the essay.
Yeah.
Could it be too long?
Mm-mm. So this is actually part of my essay when I applied to residency. Um, so my essay was only 4 paragraphs. This is just the first one. And the reason why I like your observation that it was tied with a bow. The reason for that is because then I go into like the community of my present and then my future. And so I kind of tie into family medicine, like how I see myself in the future and working in communities. Um, but the next part is like just a conclusion. And so this might give a different, I didn't include like the paragraphs, but maybe this might give you an insight of maybe perhaps what was talked about in the body of the essay.
Mhm.
Thoughts?
I think it's a good conclusion. It really shows the aspects of family medicine that you're interested in, the areas where you plan to practice. Um, yeah, I think it's pretty clear what you care about.
The other comment was direct to the point. Yeah. So I would say that some things that came to me as like, oh, like how can I structure the essay as Marlene said, like right into the point. I literally would go and look at each sentence and say, does this sentence add value? If it did not, or if it was too fluffy, take it out. The other thing that you might notice is that I really went back to like elementary school writing, like literally. I was like, okay, I need an intro sentence and a conclusion sentence to each paragraph. And part of that is also, I think to the back to the point of like theme, like it's very evident that my theme here is like community or Ubuntu, right? Like communal, like we're in this together. And it's evident that's partly because of how I grew up, but also that's how I like see my practice. But the other thing was that I'm honing in and like saying the same, not the same, but like I'm giving the same points in different ways, and showing how it's relevant in different spaces. So that if someone is just skimming your essay, right, and they happen to miss something, because I'm consistently on the same theme, it's evident, right? Like there's no doubt that okay, this is like what this person's about, right? Because the thing is, remember, like some people are having like 500 applications plus applications, right? And they have to read all of these things. And so you want to be concise, you want to be consistent in your message, but also highlighting your skills and what you want as well. Does that make sense? And I did not talk anything about family medicine to the conclusion, literally. This is all I said about family medicine at the end. The
Oh,
other
okay.
paragraphs I talked about, when I said community is like my present, I talked about the community service because my mom was really into that. Like I was in Girl Scouts and like we did like our hobbies were literally going and doing volunteering stuff. And then I became like a peer educator and I talked about how I grew from that because that was a big part of my identity. I had done that for like 8 years. Um, as a youth. And so, but I talked about like being able to talk about hard things. And then I think the last paragraph, the third paragraph, I don't remember what I talked about, but it was like the community of my future and like basically elaborating more on like the things that I wanted to do within medicine. And this is kind of just summarizing it. So yeah, so I think this is like good to mention because it really should be evident at the end, like, oh yes, like family medicine makes sense. Um, and this is the first time where I mentioned family medicine. Is in the conclusion part. And I will say that I got a lot of comments on my essay. So I put this out here because some people are more creative in writing also, and it's okay to do that. I've seen people write about that were like about their hobbies and like I've had two mentees through ABFMP. One was a painter, and she talked about painting and how that related to, you know, her skills, passions, and things like that. And then someone else, they weren't with ABFMP, but they were into like running or like doing marathons or something, and they wrote about the different shoes that they wear. And I was like, I just thought that was so creative. And they really, in family medicine, they really want to know who you are. So think outside of the box and don't think so traditional, like, oh, like I did this. And you also don't want to repeat your experiences. I would say like no more than like 2 or 3 experiences if you're going to use some of them because like they can read your experience section and you should not be repeating or listing off your CD. They really want this is a space for them to get to know who you are as a person, and the things that you will be able to bring to their program. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's super helpful. So I don't have to spend every paragraph convincing them like, hey, I actually want to do family med.
No.
Okay.
All right. And then we'll have some time to just ask questions. So there's the ABFMP group me. That's also available. See, there's the main group where you can ask questions. There's also the the match 2024 group. So utilize it as a resource to ask questions and things. In the main group, you'll have residents and attendings in. The other place I like to use is the AFP residency directory, sorry, and that's where they list a lot of the residency programs. The AAMC also has a database as well, so that might be another place to look for residency programs to kind of just scroll through and see, you know, places that might be of idea. You can often use different filters, like if you're looking in a certain state or you're looking for a certain type of program like urban, suburban, or rural, you can like kind of like filter. Another filter that I know the AFP uses is 4 years. There are some programs that are 4 years, and so they will, you know, list all the 4-year programs, and that's something particularly of interest to you. And then every year the AFP puts out a strolling through the match. And it's really like a PDF of like, these are all the things you consider. These are questions that you might want to answer in your personal statement, those types of things. They also have an app. that you can utilize as well. And then as you already know, ERAS opened June 7th. You can start submitting on the 6th of September. However, residencies don't actually see them until the 27th. So one of the biggest things I always stress is if your application is not ready by the 6th, do not submit it. Submit on the 7th, the 10th. The only thing I will say is try to submit at least a week before residencies can see, because sometimes, the website starts to crash and things like that. So you want to kind of stay clear of that, but do not submit a application that you're not proud of or feel that is complete just because you're trying to meet that 6th deadline. Okay. And then, so we've already done, this is kind of our schedule for the year. We've already done the post-match panel. Tackling national conference will be later this month on the 16th before national conference. And then we also will have a personal statement review session where people can get their personal statements reviewed. And then we'll talk about interviewing. Then we'll actually do mock interviews. And then we'll talk about, you'll have a break as people are interviewing, and then ranking strategies, and then advice for intern year. Looks like you all are already subscribed to the application. So series calendar. So that's there if you're not already. And then you can contact us through these avenues. And then I will stop sharing and see if you guys have any questions. Any other things come up for you guys? No, that's okay. Also, we'll stop the recording. You have time to ask questions off recording as well. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the recording.